This is a series of programs featuring the major candidates for the office of mayor of San Diego. Last week we heard from Mr. Aguirre. A week from today we will hear from Mr. Fletcher, and we will close out the series with Mr. Faulkner. The election is coming up. If you're 18, I hope you're registered. I hope you will vote. In the year 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, 100 million Americans of eligible voting age did not vote. It's an indictment against our country. It's an indictment against the democratic process. I personally would favor the Australian-Switzerland method, which is you either vote or you get fined. But to have that many people not voting is just a terrible, terrible thing. And as I say to young people, the future isn't about me, it is about you. Register to vote, become involved in governance, in politics, and in civic affairs, and fulfill thereby the Athenian ideal, which is to be a citizen means you participate. In Athens of antiquity, if you did not participate in civic affairs, you were known as an idiotes, which is literally an idiot. It's an appropriate characterization. With that said, I'm very pleased to introduce our second speaker in this series, a member of the City Council for the past 3 years. He's a graduate of San Diego State University. I don't know him well, but I know a lot of people who do, and he impresses them all. He's done a very, very great job for his district, and more importantly, for the city of San Diego, and he's a formidable candidate for the office of mayor. Welcome, please, the Honorable David Alvarez.
Okay. Good morning. It's great to see you here today. I have the distinct honor of serving our city as council member for the 8th Council District. Those are the communities down from the border with Mexico all the way to the downtown area. And it is really an honor. This morning before I came here, I was actually speaking with a group of veterans, and I was thanking them for what they've done and what they do, what our men and women do every day to defend our democracy and to defend the rights of us here in America, but also to expand that democracy into other countries. We are really blessed to live in this great country, and we are very blessed to live in this beautiful city. I love this city. My parents were immigrants to this country. They came here with the same dream that immigrants for centuries have come, which is to give a better life, an opportunity for their own families to be successful. They came here, they brought my older sister and my 4 older brothers, and then I was sort of an accident, as sometimes people say. My mom was already in her 40s. People usually don't have kids at that age. Women, that's a little bit, risky. But I came, and I was born and raised here in San Diego in the community of Barrio Logan. Many of you probably know where that is. It's right outside of downtown East Village area. And I grew up there, very poor. My mom did not have a high school education. In fact, she only had an elementary school education. Same thing goes for my dad. And my dad was a janitor. 26 years he retired after being a janitor, cleaning offices and bathrooms and all the work that janitors do. He also was a bracero, and some of you who studied history in this country, and now that we're having this national debate on immigration reform and how we need workers to come to do some of the work that is needed here in America, he was in a program called the Bracero Program. The Bracero Program was a program where Mexican workers were contracted to come to the U.S. in the 50s and early 60s. They would come to the U.S., they would work for a season doing a crop, whether it was tomatoes or lettuce or the different crops that were here in California and Arizona. And that's what my dad did in the 50s. He would come here. Usually he tells me it was about a 4 to 6 month contract. He'd come, he'd work, and then he'd go back home. And so in the 70s, he said, I want to go give my family a real chance, a real opportunity. I think we should go to the U.S. And so they came, and they ended up coming here to San Diego. And so they worked hard. Again, my dad ended up working for 26 years as a janitor. My mom was primarily a stay-at-home mom until I was old enough to walk to school on my own. And then she was a fast food worker. She worked at Burger King and at McDonald's. And they worked really hard to give me a chance. I do come from a family where my brothers came when they were little. And often what happens with immigrant families, and some of you might know this, there's sort of a culture clash that occurs. When you come, you have a different language, you have a different culture, you have a different way of being, and you come to America, and it's obviously different. And you have to learn to adapt, and you have to learn to be part of this new society. And for a lot of young people particularly, that's a very difficult transition for them to take. And so I think my siblings had a difficult transition. I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school and go to college, actually the only one to do that. And unfortunately in the late 80s, early 90s, the city of San Diego, and particularly in the community where I grew up, saw a tremendous increase in gang activity and violence, and drugs were very prevalent. We had the war on drugs in the early 90s, as some of you might have read about. But so my siblings, because of that culture clash, I believe, had to find some way to fit in. And oftentimes the only way to fit in that neighborhood was to be part of some of the youth gang activity that was going on. So that's what they ended up doing, unfortunately, in that early period. Thank God now over time, and we have a system that works, and they learned their lessons, and now they're all hardworking men who make sure that they work full time. They have jobs on the waterfront. You've seen the big ships out there. My brothers work on those ships, or warships, and they provide for their family. And so, even though it was hard, it was really difficult growing up there. I made it through high school. I went on to college, being the first one. I remember my graduation party, and those of you that are in high school are probably looking forward to that. And my family had a big celebration. I had a big celebration to talk about, to celebrate that I had graduated from high school, and it was like, a big deal. It was a big deal, and we had a lot of family there, and they said, all right, David, so what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm going to this thing called college. And it was a foreign thing to a lot of people, because nobody in my family had gone to college. But I went to San Diego State University, and I went in with thinking I wanted to be a teacher, because there were so many educators in my life that really put me on the right path, kept me on the right path. And I wanted to give back in the same way that so many of them have given to me. And I went in thinking I wanted to be a math teacher, and then I take all math courses. I take Calculus 1, I ace them, I go into Calculus 2, and I remember specifically sitting in the classroom. It must have been like the second day of class, and going over formulaic equations and sine and cosine and all of tangents and all of that. And I just remember thinking, well, when am I ever going to teach this to anybody? It was just so removed from reality. So I stopped taking math courses, and then I started taking psychology courses. And I found that to be really interesting, the study of human behavior. And it was interesting because of my personal history and how we each in my family had taken different paths. And I wanted to see how I could perhaps add to being a school counselor or school psychologist to maybe help kids that way. And so I studied psychology. I graduated with a degree in psychology from San Diego State. I graduated with honors in the major and with the magna cum laude in the class. And I love my college education. It was the best mistake, or the best thing that was never meant really for, it was meant obviously for me to do it, but never intended to. It was the greatest thing to do. And after college, I did some social work. I worked out in the community, and I worked with parents to work with their kids to make sure that they stayed involved in their child's education. But then in 2003, I applied to a program in Sacramento, a program called the Capital Fellows Program, where they took people from throughout the state. 18 individuals got selected into this program and sent them up to Sacramento, and you worked under the executive branch of government or the legislative branch of government. And I was selected into the executive branch of government. And I did that for a year. I was exposed to a lot of things. I learned about politics. I learned about policy making. I worked during the period of time, and as I give these talks more and more every year, people forget we had a governor who was an actor, Governor Schwarzenegger. That was the year he came into office, 2003. And it was a great time to be involved in state politics because of the transition and sort of the sense of hope of some real major changes to the state. So it was great to be up there, and I had a wonderful experience. I had a mentor. I was actually offered a job to stay afterwards, after my fellowship experience. But there was one thing that was missing. And in Sacramento, there was this bubble where people talk to each other and you get things done, but oftentimes you forget why you're there. You're representative of the people of the state of California. And it felt like a lot of people there had forgotten that we were representing people from throughout the state with some real needs. And I couldn't live with that. So I came back home, and then I started working for a state senator. And in 2009, I decided to do something that was very, very unlikely for someone like me. I decided to run for city council, to run for public office. And I got in the race, and people said, this guy has no chance of winning. He has no money. He has no name recognition. He doesn't have any political connections. No chance. So I start doing what I do best, and I start talking to people in the community as a neighborhood activist that I was, and I started talking to my neighbors, and I started talking to friends, and we start to build a campaign that's what's called a grassroots campaign. We start walking door to door, we start having meetings in people's homes and talking about the issues that are important, and that's like June of 2009. So I do that throughout 2009, and then 2010 comes, and I go and I collect my signatures so I could run for office, and there I am, I'm still plugging away. This guy still has no chance, is what everybody said. And then June of 2010, there's an election, and there's 7 candidates on the ballot, and I come out in first place. And it was like, wow, he actually made it through the runoff. But remember, you got to get 50% of the vote, and I only got about 24%. So I didn't win. And then I went into a runoff. It was me and another candidate. It was a candidate who was the brother of the sitting council member. So he had, good name recognition. He had all the political connections. He had all the money. He had all the backing from the establishment. The people who usually get involved in campaigns supported this man. And they said, oh, you can't win. You can't beat him. I mean, he's the brother of the sitting council member. He has all the money. He's got all the endorsements. There's no way. In a one-on-one, you can't win. So there I go again, walking door to door, have my house meetings, start talking to people. And November comes, general election, and I'm sitting in the computer with volunteers because at 8:01 p.m., at 8 o'clock, the polls close, and at 8:01 p.m., the registrar of voters publishes the absentee ballots. Those are the ballots when people vote by mail ahead of time. And so I'm sitting in front of the computer, and I click refresh on Internet Explorer, and the numbers come up. And I have a vote total of 60%, and my opponent has a vote total of 40%. I'm up by 20 points. It is actually quite a significant lead. And obviously, all of the volunteers in the room start cheering. We know by this time that that's a significant gap that my opponent cannot make up. And it was obviously one of the most memorable moments so far of my career, my life, because we had done something that people thought could not be done. And so now, I've been on the council for 3 years. I came on the council, we were facing some devastating cuts. We had about $50 million budget deficit. We had closed fire stations. Our parks and our recreation centers had been decimated. Our libraries were no longer open on Sundays, and they were being closed down during the week. All of the services that families that you and I depend on, that the city is supposed to be providing for its people, are not being provided in an adequate way. So I come in, and what I propose is a budget to cut that deficit, to eliminate that deficit. And I put forward some really sensible solutions that you and I would do in our home when we were facing a crisis, an economic crisis. And you start cutting away the things that are unnecessary. So we started cutting cell phone uses. We started cutting traveling and training. We started cutting things like take-home vehicles for employees. Started doing the things that were smart. We renegotiated a retiree healthcare system for our retirees so that we were giving significant enough benefit to those retirees, but not a bloated benefit that was too excessive. We did all those things, and I can tell you that this year, when we did our budget, for the third year in a row, we are not closing fire stations, but we're actually planning on building new ones so that we can have more emergency response on time. We are actually giving something back to our police officers, actually all of our employees. We cut them by 6% pay over the course of several years, and finally this year we gave them a 1.5% pay increase. Minimal, but still something that shows that we actually value their work. We are opening our library hours much longer time. Our parks and recreation centers are being maintained a little bit better. Our beaches and our bays are being maintained a little bit better, but there's still a long way to go. I am not going to give up. As a native San Diegan, I am not going to give up, just like when people thought I had no chance of being a council member, just like the statistics showed that a young man from the barrio could never graduate from high school, much less graduate from college. Just like people thought that we could not eliminate that budget deficit and restore those services that were so important to people, we've done that. I've done that, and I've fought for those things because I really believe in the city. I believe we can have a great city, a city that continues to grow, where we employ people so we can lower our unemployment base. Because when people are employed, they're spending money. And when they're spending money, that means there's taxes being generated. And when there's taxes being generated, that's money into the city's coffers. And when there's money in the city coffers, we can do the things that we need to do, like repair our roads, like maintain our parks, like build the parks that are missing in every community, from Rancho Bernardo down to San Isidro. We're park deficient, not enough park space for the number of people that live in each of the communities. We need to reinvest along our transit corridors so that we can create housing along lines of the trolley or the bus so that people can get to and from work in a more efficient manner, in a more environmentally friendly manner, in a way that doesn't keep them in parking lots on the 5, the 805, and the 15 in the morning when they go to work, or in the evening when they come home from work. That's the type of city that we need to focus on, and then that's the type of vision that we need for our future of our city. Because if we do that, we are going to be one of the greatest cities in our country. But we have a long way to go. We got to reinvest in the way we do our natural resources, our water. We're at the end of the pipeline. I hope you've all had a chance to know about the Bay Delta, the water that comes from Northern California from the mountains. It comes down a canal. We get some water from the Colorado River. We're at the very end of the line. And if something, God forbid, happens and we don't have access to that water, what are we going to do here in San Diego? We're dependent, 90% of our water is dependent on other sources. And if that's cut off, we're in trouble. And so what I've been proposing for several years now, and have the support from all sides of the political spectrum, conservative, liberal, tax groups, union groups, environmentalists, we're all on the same page. And what I've been pushing forward is something called the Water Reuse Project. We're just down the street on Miramar. There's a water reclamation plant, the North City plant, where we can take our wastewater and instead of dumping it out into the ocean, 200 million gallons a day, pumped out into the ocean, damaging our environment, we actually recapture that water, we treat it to drinking level standards, and we put it back into our system so we can create our own source of water. We can be less dependent and less at the mercy of others, and can control our own destiny when it comes to water. Renewable energy, making sure that everybody, customers, residential customers, people in their homes, people who have businesses, can acquire their energy from renewable sources. So we're not dependent on just one energy company that provides their energy now, but we can bring in energy from renewable sources, wind and solar and others, so that we can be more competitive. And we can, once we get our green economy going, we can get people employed in a new economy. That's the future of our country, not dependent completely on fossil fuels, but on those renewable sources. That's where the future jobs are going to be. So those are the types of things that I see in the future of our city. But we can't do this with the apathy that George mentioned, with folks not voting, with folks not getting involved, with people not being part of the civic dialogue. And I'm one that's always been inclusive, trying to bring people in, working together with other parties. I'll tell you what my government is going to be like. As a council member, I'm out in the community 3 times a month. I go to community centers, I go to libraries, and they just have open office hours. So people can come and talk to me about the problems that they're having in their neighborhood. And then we work on those problems and we get those issues resolved. And that's how we can get things done in the city, by having open government like that, and efficient government. We've got to cut bureaucracies. We've got to actually help small business. We've got to get out of the way of some of the small businesses that are trying to grow, the entrepreneurs that want to start jobs here. We got to help them so that then when they employ those folks that they employ, we're going to have a better tax base. We're going to grow our tax base and be able to have that money that we need to spend. So that's my vision for the future of San Diego. That's my hope of what I want to achieve. And I got involved, I'll end with this. I got involved not because I ever wanted to be a politician. I never dreamed of being mayor or president or any of those things. But I grew up in a community, Barrio Logan, where pollution was present every day. And when I was in middle school, in the inner city, they would bring us up to UCSD every summer, for a whole summer, every day of the summer. Would come up here to teach us about science, technology, the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I would take a course here in biochemistry. On one of those summer days, the professor decided to take us down to the city, and they happened to take us down to my neighborhood. In fact, we stopped in front of my home. We stopped in front of my home, which was sandwiched between two shops, two machine shops, a chrome plating shop and a machine shop. And my front yard was the exhaust vent for a chrome shop. Anybody, you know anything about chrome shops, they put out a lot of toxics. And I can trace my asthma back to those days. And so on that day when we came on that bus and we stopped in front of my house, and the professor started talking about how in this case, there's an impact to families, there's an impact to children, high asthma rates in this community. And all along, I didn't know we were going there. And when we were there, I did not say where we were. I did not acknowledge that we were in my house, at my home, or in my community. It was actually a little bit intimidating. I was ashamed of where we were because of the bad things that the teacher was talking about that happened there. And so I kind of, when you're ashamed and you sort of slouch in and you hide in your seat, that's sort of what I remember doing. And he said how this is so impactful in this community. And there was a young man, classmate, who said, why would anybody want to live here? And that made me feel like that big. I was so ashamed of who I was for that moment. And I was more ashamed because that day, my mom was coming home from work. She was wearing her apron, her visor with the Burger King logo. And she was coming home and about to go into our gate. And so it was very shameful. And what I knew then was that people, and politics, and people getting involved matter. It makes a difference. And that's what I did after that trip. I got involved. I fought those polluters. We were able to get them out of there after a long, long fight. Nobody was paying attention. Our city leaders weren't paying attention. Regulators weren't paying attention. But I found out that if you get involved and there's something in your community that you don't like, that you don't want, or that you want, you can fight to make it happen. And that was sort of my building blocks for why I've been so involved in my community and why I decided to run for city council. And that's why I want to be mayor, because I really believe in the city. I love this city. I'm raising my own family now. My wife, we're expecting our second child. My 4-year-old daughter, want to make sure that it's just the greatest city that we have, that they have the same opportunities, that everybody has the same opportunities that I've had. Even with all the challenges that I had, you can always be successful. And so if we give people the opportunity to be successful, really, really special things can happen in people's lives and in our city. And that's what I'm working towards, and that's why I want to be your next mayor. So we'll take some questions now.
When you're running for mayor, you have to do a lot of things. So the councilman has other engagements that he needs to get to. But we've got time for about 3 questions. Yes.
Steve Chappell, I do the intellectual capital column in the Union Tribune and nationally. Could you speak to maybe your grand vision, if you have one, for San Diego in terms of high tech? And it's kind of a city with very cool things going on, and you represent a part of it, but in terms of that future of what we could become.
The question has to do with the grander vision for the city involving high tech and other such. opportunities.
Absolutely, and we've got some really amazing core centers of employment. So obviously Sorrento Valley, which has thrived so much with what's going on. Downtown, it's a cluster of employment. Our military sector, which is so important to our economy. Down on the Mesa by the border, and one of the issues that we're talking about a lot more lately, which is great, is our dynamic border relationship with Mexico and the border economy, and how if we create the infrastructure down there, we can get more commerce. Latest figure, $7 billion of economic output is lost because of delays in border crossings. We're not getting trucks across back and forth as quickly as possible to export and import. So there's a lot of opportunities on the Mesa. Making sure that the innovative economy that's going on in Rancho Bernardo, those manufacturing, those tech companies can continue to come down. We attract them with public dollars. We got to use our public dollars a lot better. Our CDBG funding, our HUD funding that comes from federal government. The state has the California Competes program, where we can attract those companies, but we've got to make sure that we stay on top of it. One of the things we haven't done in San Diego is we actually been a little bit lazy when it comes to economic development. We had one tool, redevelopment, and that was sort of the only thing the city ever really got engaged with. We've got the ability to use new market tax credits, our HUD funding. Those are the ways that you leverage public dollars for private dollars so that people can want to move, because in a lot of instances, companies don't get a return on their investment till a few years out. And so to begin bringing them in and attracting them here, we've got to give them an incentive. And those are the incentives that I think we can build in. Making sure that our transit works well so that our mid-coast trolley core gets built so that people can travel up to the UC area in a more efficient manner. Those are all the new ways that San Diego is going to develop. And then our infill, our core community infill with more development along those transit lines, because San Diego just can't grow in the way it used to. It's going to be all infill growth, and we've got to make sure that we go out into those communities that have the ability to do that, they have the potential to do that, and engage them early on so they don't become NIMBYs where they want anything to go into the community, because there are opportunities, but unless we incentivize that with public dollars, with all of those tools that I just mentioned, they're not going to want to, nobody's going to want to invest in a lot of those communities because they're difficult sites. If it was easy, it would have already been done. One project that I worked on with the Housing Commission on is Commercial and 22nd. It's affordable housing, it's senior housing, it's restoring a historic building, and it's along a transit line. That's the future of San Diego, where people live, work, and play within these urban core centers. That's what the younger workforce wants, and that's how we're going to attract those quality employers into our city.
LV, Ellison.
The issue down in Barrio Logan, I think, is correct, between the shipbuilders and the community. There's been a big laugh about it, and I must confess, I don't exactly understand the two sides. Could you just briefly say what the two sides are, and then why you have chosen to support it?
So this is, in the city of San Diego, we've got 52 communities, and each community has a planning document, a plan that's a roadmap for how the community is going to develop in the future. And Barrio Logan is the first one that's come in about 10 years, actually, to the city council. We really haven't invested, and we've delayed those, unfortunately, for far too long. But now we're moving on. Barrio Logan came, and the community of Barrio Logan is, if you know the Bay Bridge, the San Diego Bay Bridge into Coronado, it's right on the San Diego side, not the Coronado side, the San Diego side, and it goes down to about National City. It's along the bay. And there was a plan with two alternatives coming forward before council. One, put in a lot more residential community development in the future, and the other one put in more industrial commercial uses in the future. And so the people who lived there, the community, wanted the more residential plan, which is alternative one, and the shipyards wanted the more industrial. What they were both, I felt they were both wrong, is that because of my experience that I shared with you, that I live there, you cannot allow an industrial machine shop to be adjacent to a residential development. That just is, that's a prescription for trouble in the future. And both plans did that. Both plans abutted residential and industrial uses. They allowed them. One took it a little bit further west and one took it a little bit further east, but they were both doing the same thing. And so what I proposed, which was a compromise that the city council approved, was that we create a barrier or a buffer. So along 5 square blocks, straight square blocks, we have no residential and we have no industrial. We only allow for commercial uses. And that allows the development of the Barrio Logan community to, on one side of one street, which is Newton, allow for residential. Then you have an entire block where you have no residential and you don't have any industry. And then on the other side of that block, then you have all the industrial uses. And that was my way of separating so that there wouldn't be future conflicts, because they were both right. You do not want industrial uses next to homes, but you also don't want the homes encroaching on the industrial uses, because those jobs are too critical. And if you start allowing high rises and encroachment, then you threaten the maritime industry, which is something we don't want to do. That's a very important industry. It has great jobs, and we got to protect it into the future.
Yes, sir, and then we'll end here. Yes, sir.
When do you think San Diego can become water independent?
Water independence in San Diego is a long ways off. What I'm proposing gets us 100 million gallons of water a day. The water reuse project that I'm proposing, it's a long ways. It's a huge investment, and we don't just have money sitting around in the city to do this. So we have to go to the ratepayers, people who are consumers of water, and we have to ask them to help pay for those projects. And so we first need to build this plant that I'm talking about, and that's going to take several years to build. And then after that, we need to move on to a different project. But completely water independent, which is really where we should be headed, is still decades away if we want to get to that point. But at least with the project that I'm proposing, you become less dependent on those other sources, which again, God forbid something happens, we're in deep trouble here.
Last question. Yes.
My name is Kay Malloy, and I'm a teacher at the Croy School at UCSD, which is a middle school, high school charter school for first to attend college students. Where last year we graduated, 100% of our students were accepted to a four-year university. So it's a very successful school. What is the problem? Why can't we get good education for every student in our city? I mean, it is time to look at the Croy School and move it to other places. I mean, do you have any ideas? Have you been in touch with educators? Sometimes I get so frustrated because I know it can be done, but it takes money. I know it takes money. So let's do it.
Well, the question is about the success, the great success of Croy School. Why can't we duplicate that in other places in our city?
Right. And we can, because that model does work. I know the Proy School has a lot of students that come from the Barrio Logan College Institute, where I used to work. That's a model that works. My wife is an educator. She has another model, and a lot of her students actually come to Proyce. And what we need to do is we got to focus on students first, and we got to get everybody to focus around students, and that includes parents, teachers, community, and principals. Oftentimes we've got the adults fighting with each other, so how are we going to be able to accomplish anything for the kids? We forget to think about them first. On Thursday night, I was with a group, an old high school teacher of mine, a college teacher, and then an educator that I've met through the community who was a principal at city schools. And we were having this dialogue about how do we do that, and we've got to make sure we have this good collaboration occurring between everybody who's important to a child's education. But we have models that are successful, that work, that you can take first-generation kids and actually get them on the path to college. I mean, I was in the IB program. That's another program that works. I went to San Diego High School. And that program gets you prepared for the world and for workforce and for college. But it does take resources. And there's still a lot of people who don't have the information. There's a lot of families that don't understand that you can have access to this high quality education if you demand it. And so we've got to get parents involved. We've got to get teachers to be more accountable, along with principals and all educators, so that we can build that. And we can take the model somewhere else. It doesn't have to be here. I know a lot of the students get bused in. I mean, most of them must get bused in because the population that you serve is first generation. So why can't we build something like that in the inner cities so that the kids don't have to get bused in? The models work. We can replicate it. What my proposals in education are, and as you probably know, the mayor does not oversee city schools. That's not within the purview of the city. But we can partner. We can become allies. And in my blueprint for my vision for San Diego, we talk about how we create more partnerships with business so that kids can have an opportunity to have exposure to different career paths. How do we do linked learning, which is a way to get schools to be focusing on careers, preparing the kids for careers or for college, with more career technical education. So it's more hands-on and less lecture-like. The new way that we need to educate our young kids is different than even when I was in school and when many before were in school. We've got to be more creative. We've got to be a little bit more assertive, and we've got to work in partnership a lot better than we have been doing. And I'm someone that's willing to step up as a former educator myself. I've taught after school. I've written curriculum for after school programs. I really believe that there's a role for the mayor to play to partner with our school system to bring those types of programs to every community so that every child can have an opportunity to be successful.
He has another obligation, so we need to let him go. But let me just say this in conclusion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's a very inspirational story. And I hope the lesson that every young person takes from here is there's a role to play in public service. You can make a difference. He is a living embodiment of that. He's done amazing things in his life, and we're grateful, sir, for your commitment to public service, and we wish you well in this campaign.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.